Hello, welcome to another live stream with me, Scott Claus. And as always, just starting out by doing a little bit of a tech check, make sure everything's working right, sound, video. If anybody's out there, before we get too far along, let me know if you can see, you can hear, and we'll get going right away. My name is Scott Claus. I'm with CG Spectrum. It's these guys. And today I'm going to be talking about 2D animation. CG Spectrum is an online school where you can learn all about animation as well as other things that are related to electronic arts. And one of the things that I'm going to be talking about today is how to survive in the business of entertainment. It's something that I think everybody who's ever been interested in entertainment as a business is interested in some level. I had a pretty long, lucrative career, and I've known lots of people who have worked in the business for a long time. And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit today. It's like, well, it's enough to just try and get into the business, but what if you actually are in the business and you want to stay? Or what happens if you want to get a job and you decide that you want to keep it? And so what are some of the things you might encounter? It's just a general topic I'm going to talk about a little bit today because I think it's unique. I think it's a unique thing to have to deal with when you're working in any branch of the entertainment industry, but specifically in animation. And well, it's something I have experience with, but there are a lot of unique things that nobody tells you about when you go bursting onto the scene with all your hopes and dreams and ideas, and we're going to talk about that a little bit too. So, as usual, the drill is thanks Fernando. The drill is that please feel free to ask questions at any time in the chat, and as long as it's cool and clean and you're cool, then I'm happy to talk about anything that anybody likes. Tangentially related to any of the stuff I bring up, which means animation, movies, even games. I'm not a gamer, sorry, but I am interested in them, and I like hearing about what people like. So please feel free to, and then there are other people who chime in who like to talk about things as well. So hopefully you can find somebody who's willing to talk about whatever it is you're interested in here today on CG Spectrum's live stream with me, Scott Claus, talking about 2D animation and doing some drawings with you today. So I am working on a project I started a while back. It's based on O'Malley the Alley Cat by the Disney Studios from the film Aristocats, which is a film I saw when I was really little and thought it was pretty cool. But really, as I've gotten older, I just like the design of the characters, and I think they're easy to draw, which is a big plus too. It's kind of retro, but there's something fun about it too. A lot of people like what they call the scratchy era of the Disney films, generated by having drawings transferred to Xerox clear cells and then placed on backgrounds. So it has kind of a organic quality to it. Well, mine probably will too, just because that's how I draw. But anyway, this is the character I'm going to be working on today. I've been animating it now for about 3 sessions. To answer somebody's question they asked once, yes, animation takes a long time. It takes a long time to draw, and especially if you want to get it exactly the way you want it. I may not get it exactly the way I want it here, but I'll make a pretty good effort to try and make it look nice. So yeah, it takes a long time. So I'm at the cleanup stage. If you'd like to know how we got here, I've gone over that several times in previous streams. I'll just sum it up by saying I've gone through the rough stage, I've done some rough animating, I did some tie downs, I've talked a lot about what a character take is, which is what I'm doing here today. And so that leads us up to the point where I'm now refining my drawings and doing a cleanup pass. And so that's where we're at today. So I'm just going to jump right in and start drawing. There's a whole lot of work to do. But before I do that, let me just play it so you can see what it looks like, the work in progress. So this is where we are with this scene so far. So what I've done, you can see up on the right hand corner, you can see these charts that I've done. That's going to be my guide as I go to clean it up. if I isolate those, you can see them a little bit better. There you go. So my charts here are the guide that I've been using. That's up in the right-hand corner to determine which direction I'm going with the drawings. And when I was animating, I was a little free form. I just was like, oh, this looks good, that looks good, let's just put that in here and there. And now that I've done that, I had to go back and analyze everything and go, all right, what did I do? And this is good not only for a case where I might have someone following me up, which would be wonderful, but also a case where I have to follow up myself. And specifically, since it takes so long, there's a possibility I could forget where I was at a certain point. So as long as I've got charts, just like the ones on my screen, then I'll know how I got here. And that's really important when you're doing animation. I can't stress enough, planning is everything when it comes to animation. Really, at some point at least, you have to start getting in the habit of planning and practicing good organization skills. So I don't want to talk about that too much. That's not fun. Let's have fun. So, hey Kevin, explain more about the charts if you have time. I hate how it works. Well, I would be delighted to. So there you go, folks. That's how it works. Ask me a question. I will be happy to expand on this. Let's look at this as an example. So, well, first of all, charts are basically, they look like this. And they're basically telling you, okay, I've got one drawing on frame 1. I've got one drawing on frame 3. I've circled them because those are key extreme poses. I'll show you the key extreme poses in my scene, so you'll see what I mean. But they're basically the poses that tell the story of the whole scene. When I set this up, I made specific poses that would tell the story of the entire scene just with those poses, kind of like you do with storyboards, or if you were doing a comic book or something. Then I went back and I broke it down a little bit into smaller pieces and kept doing that until it was fleshed out and nice and smooth. Once I did all that, then I went back and looked at it and said, well, how did I do this again? So for example, key pose number 1 and key pose number 3, assuming there was one. Well, somewhere in between there was another pose that was an in-between or a breakdown or something. If it was a breakdown, I probably would call it number 2, and I'd underline it to say, well, it's still technically important. And so pay attention to the fact that it's not just an in-between. Let me change these numbers up a little bit so we have more to play with. So let's say we've actually got 5. So 1 to 5. Then I have to determine at some point, well, what's halfway between 1 and 5 in terms of the spacing? And I'll show you what that looks like in my work in just a minute. But in terms of spacing, let's say, well, 3 should be approximately halfway between 1 and 5 in terms of spacing, meaning then there's going to be a 2 and there's going to be a 4. And I can designate these with little symbols that a lot of us use in the 2D world for years and years, like this. See these little parentheses I'm putting on them, and then sometimes will even say, well, halfway again. And what I'm doing is I'm just describing the spacing between drawings. So when I go back and follow myself up, or if someone else were to follow me up, then they know what I was thinking when I was animating this thing. So let's look at the charts and I'll show you what I was doing with them. On frame 1, I want to hold the character from 1 to 9. I might go back later and add a blink or something. I don't think there's a blink in the scene. Eventually, but I might, just to keep the character alive, might add a blink or something, but really I'm just holding from 1 to 9. So that's why I drew this, which just says hold from 1, drawing number 1 to drawing number 9. Simple, right? That's an easy one. But then it starts to get a little bit more complicated, especially since I think I've changed the order of some of these too. So maybe I'll fix it up right now. But let's go to the next key of importance. So another key that was important on this was this drawing, which was drawing number 14. So up here in the corner, if I go to 14, yeah, I've changed the order of these a little bit. So ignore what's happening on the screen. We'll just talk about the chart. But so you look at the chart, and it says from 9 to 17, there are these drawings, 10, 11, 13, 15. I'm doing most of this on 2s, and so that's why it's odd numbers, 9, 11, 13, 15. I did 1-on-1s just to make it more smooth, so that's why there's a 10. But so all these drawings fit in between 9 and 17, but what order they go in? What order should you do them in, and what are they describing? Well, they're describing that there's a halfway point between 9 and 17, and that's 11. And then there's another halfway between those two, that's 10. There's a halfway between 11 and 17, that's 13, and then half again for that with 15. So each one of these is just breaking my action down into smaller and smaller increments so that it'll look smooth and it'll look like it's one continuous drawing that's moving and not a series of drawings that are moving. The goal you're after, whether you're doing a bouncing ball or a complicated character move like this one kind of is, the goal is to make it look like it's one single thing happening and not a series of drawings flapping by. So if you look at this, it should technically look like it's a cat. It should look like there's a cat and the cat's reacting to something and pulling up its paws. And you shouldn't, technically speaking, you shouldn't be aware that there is there are dozens of drawings around, just under 40 to be actual. You shouldn't be thinking about that. You should just be concentrating on the action itself and going, oh, that looks nice, or it doesn't look nice, depending on how the case may be. And that is determined by how many drawings there are and how close they are in spacing to each other. And so now if I go back and I look at some of these, you can see, and whether or not they're exactly like the chart says, it's fine, neither here nor there. Let's look at the actual drawings themselves and talk about that. So it's easy to do one towards the end of the scene because those drawings at this point, they're actually just settling in. They're settling, they're slowing out, settling into the final pose. And so from here, which is, let's go back to my drawing layer, from here, which is drawing 31 to drawing 39, there are a series of changes. So the cat brought his paw up, his head is tilting down, his shoulders are kind of adjusting. It's actually not very nice drawings. I'm probably going to fix that up at some point, not today. But he has to go from here to here. So what should he do between here and there? If you look at it in between, what it's basically doing is I've got a shape here, and then I've got a shape here that looks like this. Oh, that's terrible. Here, let's do this. Let's do something much more simple. Here, I've got a shape here, and it's going to eventually turn into this shape here. Well, somewhere in between this and this, it has to morph and change. Is it going to morph and change? So this is like, say, this is drawing 1, and then this is drawing 3. Is it going to morph and change like this as it turns from a square to a circle? If it does, then that would probably be a halfway point because we've lost the corners and it's starting to get more rounded, but it's neither the square nor is it the circle. So that would make it kind of a halfway point, a halfway move. It's halfway between the square and the circle. By contrast, if I wanted to favor it to one side or the other, then maybe what I'd do is I'd have the square still have its sharp edges, but it's starting to morph into something like this. So half of it's square and half of it's circular. Or more likely what I'd do is say, well, on its journey down to being a circle, it's actually going to kind of hug the square. And so there's less space between the square and and there's more space between the circle. And so this would be something like a third. It's a third of the way from the distance between the square and the circle. Third. So I would draw it like this. 1, this is 1, this is 3. And I'd say, well, that's 2. And 2 is 1/3 the distance between 1 and 3. And so that's It's looking like a war zone on my page, but that's kind of, in a nutshell, what it is when I'm talking about charts. It's a language, a symbolic language you can use to help describe the timing of your scene and how many drawings are required and where they should be for yourself or for anybody to follow up at a later time after you've kind of animated it all. So hopefully that helps. And if you have any other questions about it, please, I'll talk about it all night if you want until you understand it. But that's the basics of it. So, John, school your cousins at the Rock to ask for favors. Yeah, JD, yeah, we'll all hook up with the Rock and we'll ask him for favors. So here's something that's kind of a industry secret that everybody should kind of adapt. If you're trying to get into basically any industry, but specifically in just the business of entertainment, is understand that nobody is ever going to do you favors when you ask. That sounds kind of cynical and cruel, I suppose, and it's not always true. But the truth of the matter is the way it works is this. It's very simple. Take notes, or there'll be a quiz on this. What you need to do is you need to make a relationship with somebody based on appealing to their ego or appealing to something that they want. I can't tell you how many times I've met with famous people who have power, and all they wanted to know from me is how they could make a deal with Disney to make a film. And specifically when I was working there, but even after I stopped working there, even to this day, I will have people come up to me and they'll say, "Hey, I have this great idea for a project, and I would love to see it come to life and turn into something really cool." And what they've neglected to mention is, why do I care? That sounds really mean, but it's true. Is what's in it for me? Oh, well, you could be attached to my amazing project. It's like, well, I have amazing projects of my own, and I have a lot of things that I'm trying to get produced or have in the past. So again, the question is what's kind of in it for me? Why would I bank everything on your project when I've got projects of my own? And The Rock, he's got a career, he does his own thing, he could probably do just about anything he wants. So why would he want to gamble on an unknown and create something and go out of his way? It's hard to get things produced. It's hard to create things. They make it look easy because that's what entertainment is all about. Is we work really hard in entertainment to make it look like we don't work hard so everybody can sit back and relax and play and enjoy it. But the truth is it's really difficult to get something launched, and at least professionally, to get money for something and have an official production going. It's a lot of work, a lot of people, a lot of wrangling of things. And so somebody who's been through a production or two will be very wary of that and think, well, why should I get involved in something? And then so many productions don't make any money. And again, I've said this many times before, for anyone who's never heard it, the business of Hollywood is simply that. It's a business. It's about making money. And yes, dreams come true and wonderful things happen, but it's still a business. And that's the bottom line, is what Hollywood's concerned with. So anyway, so just keep that in mind. What you want is you want to offer something that they are interested in. And that could be anything. It could be, oh, this is a project that they've been wanting to do. Many times I've talked to people and they're like, oh, I've always wanted to get into animation. I've always wanted to get into theater or voice acting or whatever. And so what I need to do is I need to find somebody who is in that business already and then offer them something. And it's not money, because especially people who are rich and famous, they don't need money as much as other things. It's, well, what is it that I can offer? I had another friend who is actually pretty famous, who had a chance to be on a set with people who are much more famous than she is. And she was like, I want to get a tour of the studio and I want to kind of ingratiate myself with them. How should I do that? I'm like, well, feed their ego and then offer them something in return. So I've had many, many lucky experiences where people offered me things for free, just did favors for me. I'm not sure why. I don't think about it too much, because if I do, it makes me crazy. But people will just do me favors, but you can't count on that. You have to think in terms of what is it that I have that person would want, and how do I appeal to them in a way that appeals to their ego and makes it seem like, oh, you don't have to do anything. You just sit back and relax. And while you're doing that, I'll be working really hard to make you look good and make sure that your whatever your goal is happens. So that's kind of where you should start. I always talk about with schmoozing. It's not about, hey, can you do me a favor? I'm a really good person. You'll like me if you get to know me. Can you just do something for me? It's like, no, that doesn't work. And I mean, it does occasionally. Don't never say never. But more likely, what you're going to find is approaching someone and being very sincere and very straightforward about how much you respect the person who has something you want, and appealing to their ego and offering them something that they really want or could use, and then starting to strike up a relationship with them, and eventually coming to a place where you're both wanting the same thing, and so you fight for it as a team. But the idea that a celebrity needs me for anything that I have to offer at this point, is probably slim and none. Yet at the same time, like I said, I still get contacted for people who want me to somehow help them realize their animation dreams in terms of production. It's like, well, I'm not in production right now, and so I'm probably not the best person to ask, but I'll listen to your ideas and I'll try and point you in the right direction. But you really want to find somebody who's hungry and who's prowling around looking for projects if you want to sell them. Yeah, he's super busy. Yeah, and there are plenty of stories, a lot of horror stories about people who try to, even people who are related to people who are powerful and trying to get in on a good thing. And it's still a person. It's still somebody who's busy, and they're like, well, what do you got to offer me? What's in it for me? How do I use this to my advantage? And again, it sounds a little cynical. It sounds like nobody ever does anything altruistic, but they do. They do it all the time. My whole career was predicated on people just doing things because, for whatever reason, like I said, I try not to overthink it. But if you really want something from somebody, you have to make it worth their while. You have to say, there's a reason why this is something you should gamble on instead of that thing and that thing and that. If he's got his own production company, then he's inundated with people who are like, pick me, I want to do a project on it. You have potential for a really unique situation, opportunity to actually make some contact and rise above some of that. The rest is up to you. You have to come up with a really good pitch. You'll probably get one whack at it. If it doesn't go well, you probably won't get another chance. So you really have to make sure that that you're ready when the time comes, and that you take it very seriously, and not so much talking about hopes and dreams, but really talking about how I can make money for you. I can do whatever it is that he wants. I don't know what he wants. I know a famous animation person with his own studio who recently told a story about meeting Kobe and talking about doing an animated film with him, and then they ended up having negotiations, and it was all about doing animation, and it was just something he really wanted to do. Right time in the right place. So you can't predict these things. You just got to go with the flow, and keep at it and keep doing things because you love to do them, as I say all the time. Anyway, that's going off on a tear there. Again, hi Vanessa, welcome back. I'd ask programmers questions about their experiences and projects. The card information. Yeah, so I mean, again, most people are human, just like, so this is for Vanessa. Everybody's kind of, specifically in the entertainment business, again, kind of a topic for tonight, but everybody is sort of hustling. There is no time when people don't hustle to some degree, in my estimation. Everybody has to kind of keep their name out in the in the world and make sure that they're getting noticed and doing the projects, the kind of things they want to do. There never is a time when you just sit back and everything comes to you. If that's what you want, you're probably in the wrong business. So there is no reason not to take every offer sincerely, especially when you're getting started, or every situation, and just go, well, there might be something in it. But like I said, think in terms of, if you're trying to get through to someone, think in terms of what you have that they might want. I remember when I drop his name all the time, but he shouldn't. But I remember when I was hanging out with Rob Bottin, who did the special effects for The Thing in 1982. One of the happiest Halloweens I ever had, hanging out with him in haunted houses and having him tell me stories. But he was interested in knowing more about CG animation because he does practical effects, and CG clearly was taking over the world. And I had just come off of either Life of Pi or something. I think it was Life of Pi. And so he was very curious to know more about what I did. And I'm like, here I am, me, relative nobody, and here he is, who single-handedly created some of the coolest special effects known, and still people talk about how cool they are. And he's wanting to know something about CG animation from me. And it's like, well, there you go. I had something he wanted. I had something that he was interested in. And had I pursued it, or I don't know, had I wanted something too, then maybe we'd have struck up some business arrangements or something. I just wanted to be pals with him. And I was happy just to hang out, which is what we did whenever we hung out. I didn't really want to talk shop, and he didn't really either. But, you know, he was interested. He was curious about what I did, and I could see he was thinking, oh, well, maybe there's something in there that I could use. I'll keep this guy around, and you never know. And that's just how Hollywood works. That's just how entertainment works, is you just never know when your next break is going to come from. So be cool to everybody, like everybody, and keep your options open all the time. $7 Productions, that's funny. The Rock has $7 Productions. I wonder if that's like bucks as in deer, or if it's bucks as in dollars. But he has a lot more money than $7. Yeah, it's funny. You don't think about how really difficult it is to get something produced until you actually go through the process of it. And think about this too. I don't know about you guys. Ask yourself, last time you enjoyed something but didn't love it, did you really think about how it got made? Did you think about who made it and how long it took and how many artists or technicians were involved? Or did you just watch it and go, okay, well, that was fun, next? I'm going to guess that you probably just, if it was something you were watching casually, that you probably just went, yeah, that was fun, next. And never even thought about how much work it went into it, and how unlikely it was that that thing even got made in the first place. By example, there's a show that premiered recently. I'm not going to say what it is, but it sounds like it's not doing too well. Everybody had high hopes for it, and it didn't. It doesn't seem to have been liked by critics or audiences, and it's just sort of like, okay, well, that was a failure. And you stop and think, well, but all the work that went into making something like that happen, and then it's like, nope, don't like it. So just remember, when you're getting started in the entertainment industry or whatever, that it takes a lot to make a project. And when a project gets made, it's a really big deal. And I'm always excited for people who have had some success of some kind, have broken out of the pack a little bit and done something that got noticed, because it's so hard to do these days. Even for people who are rich and famous, it's hard to generate excitement about projects. There's so much content out there. And I'm staggered, speaking of games, by just how many games are out there and keep coming out every year and replacing the old games. And it's a business model that I don't know much about, so I don't think much about it either. But just the sheer amount of work that goes into a game, and then it's like, well, finish that one. I had a friend who had said he was going to, it was one of the Legend of Zelda games came out, and he says, well, I'm going to parse out my weekend so that I don't go through the game too quickly, because then that's it. I won't get another one for a while. And it really hit home with me how much work goes into a game. It took years to create the game. He was going to play it like over Thanksgiving holidays. And so it's kind of strange. Look at the credits for a good-sized film that has special effects in it, and think of all the people who worked on it. And every single one of them has hopes and dreams and is working hard to kind of be successful in their career, whatever that means to them. And then take it seriously when you get your opportunities, because the odds are against, and I don't say that to be cynical, I just say it to be realistic. The odds of you getting your project made in the first place, let alone having them be successful, are very slim. It doesn't happen all the time, even though it seems like it does. It's really kind of a rare thing. I like it to think of it this way. I'm going to draw this out. I've said this before, but if you think of it this way, these ellipses, out here in this circle are all the people who ever had a dream, whoever wanted to do something, whoever had a project idea or thought, I want to be an animator or an actor, that's a big one, or a director or something. Inside of here are the people who actually made an attempt to try and get somewhere with their dreams, to try to set something up so they could become whatever it is they thought they wanted to be. Inside of there, and so that means that all the people out here are the ones who didn't get that far. Inside of that circle are the people who were able to do what they wanted and achieve some sort of success with it. Working actors, working directors, working animators, special effects people. Inside of there are people who were actually exceptionally successful. Inside of there are the people you see on in movies and TV. It just keeps getting smaller and smaller until you've just got like a few people inside of that circle. So you think of all the millions of people outside who always had dreams, and all the people inside who started those dreams, all the people inside who were able to finish their projects, whatever they were, those inside who got some notice for their projects, those inside who got some success with the projects, and then way down inside of here are the ones who really took off. The Rock, for example, is somebody who had an exceptional run of good fortune mixed with talent and whatever else he had that got him where he is. But I just like to remind myself every now and then. I try and get published and all sorts of things I've tried to do. And you just think of the odds that you would get into that inner circle are pretty slim and none. I am very aware of the fact that I was both lucky and talented in my career. The fact that I got into Disney when I did was unheard of, and at least by today's standards. And the fact that I was able to parlay that the way I did, it's just many people tried to do that after me and just didn't. But for some reason, I was able to have a really successful career and have a good time. But I never once took it for granted, ever. I always was aware of the rarity of what I had. Okay, I did take it a little bit for granted sometimes when I was at lunch at DreamWorks, and I'd be like, oh, this again? It's like, no, that is taking it for granted. Free lunch. Or at Disney, I remember they would give us catered dinners and all these high-calorie cakes and stuff, and it's like, oh, I like the chocolate ones. I don't like that berry one as much, or whatever. Okay, so yeah, I did take it a little advantage of, or for granted. But hey, that was part of the fun of the job, and it's part of the fun of being young. All right, so what do you got? So yeah, dollars, because when he was younger, you talked about how he was broke and had $7 in his pocket, how he got to where he is now. Yeah, a lot of us, I was like that. I had $7 at one point. Well, maybe not 7, but I was, broke at some point, couple points, and it teaches you. It makes you learn, and people who are successful will find a way out of it if that's what they want to do. One of the things I wanted to kind of talk about tonight, it's a question for you out there, anybody who's out there listening right now, is how you define success. What is it that you do the things you do for? Are you doing them because you want to get rich and famous? Are you doing it because you have dreams of doing something else and that's a gateway to that? Are you doing things just for the love of doing them? I'm curious to know It's a question I sometimes ask myself. I certainly have asked it at crucial points in my career where I was not sure if I wanted to continue on in the route I was on. But ask yourself, what does success mean to you? When I was taking off for Los Angeles for the first time to live forever and work in the movies, my mom poked her head in my bedroom the night before I left, and she said to me, she goes, "I know you're going to make it." And I thought a lot about that at the time, and then years later, it's like, what does it mean, make it? What does it mean to you to say, oh, I've made it, I accomplished whatever? You know, what are your goals? The reason I ask that question is because if you know what your goals are, you can attain them. You may not, but if you know what it is that you want, then you can proceed. It's people who don't know what they want that I think have the hardest time. It's not the end of the world. It's just, it's so much more helpful to kind of have an idea in mind. It's like, I want to live in a big house. I want to have a fancy car. I want to be head of a studio. I want to be able to animate like Milk Call. You know, that's something you can work with. But this vague notion of success, I think it's gotten diluted over the years. I think some people are like, well, I want to be famous, and that means I'm going to go on Instagram and do something really stupid, and as a result, I'll be famous. Well, why do you want to be famous? Is it because you just like the attention? Well, I promise you it doesn't last, and you're going to just be hungry for more once it's over. So what is it about the things that you want that you think of them as being successes? And just ask yourself that question, and keep that question handy when you go through your life, and keep referring back to it. And I guarantee you that if you do that, you'll find that you'll get the success you want. If you know what it is, if you know how to define it, then you can attain it. It's when you don't know what something is that you want, that's when it gets hard. But that's a great story about The Rock. I'm sure he had some goals. It's like, I want to have more than $7 in my pocket. Star Wars Episode 9, beautiful but hard to watch. That. I'll leave that one alone for now, but I know you guys have thoughts about that, and I'll let you discuss it. But yeah, I teach a story class, and we talk about things like that a lot. So JD, you're thinking about that, the Godzilla movie a lot. I can't even. Script is dull. Effects work is cool. Yeah, again, I'll let you guys go off on that if you want. Engineer, you're working on writing scripts and world building. That's great, Don Skull. Keep it up. Kevin, you're teaching yourself animation. Better save up for. Sorry, I'm reading. It'd be better to save up for an animation school. You love my advice here. Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. Sometimes I'm speaking into the void, sort of like late night hosts in lockdown days. It's like, I don't know if you guys are into this stuff or not, but I just figured this way. When I was starting out, there were no resources, none. There were resources that taught me some technical things, and then there were a lot of really hardcore technical books. Hardcore meaning like a lot of technical information, a lot of history, a lot of stuff that had nothing to do with what I wanted to do. And I always thought, wouldn't it be great to just sit down with somebody and hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak? What is it really like? And again, I've got friends now who've worked in all walks of things that I was interested in, entertainment specifically. I've had a chance to talk to a lot of people who are, you know, my idols and rich, famous, talented, whatever, and you know, get information from them now. But when I was starting out, that's when I really wanted to know. It's like, well, what's it like? Is this something I want to do? Do I want to be in Hollywood and toiling away and doing the Hollywood scene, or would I rather do something else? There wasn't no way to know because there was no resource to learn about it. And even now, I'm not sure that there are great resources for this sort of thing. I think that there's a lot of information out there, but there's also a lot of junk that doesn't teach you anything. So sometimes when I'm rambling away like this in these streams, what I'm really doing is I'm trying to offer up a resource for anybody who's wanting to get started in the business and wants to know a little bit about what you might encounter when you're there, and make an educated decision about whether it's something you want to take on or if you'd rather not. And the truth of the matter is, for anybody out there, the test of whether you really want something is if you hear all the bad stuff and you do it anyway. When I say bad stuff, I mean, like, I heard, for example, that Disney worked people really hard and ended up doing a lot of overtime. And when the option came up for me to work at Disney, I said, okay, all right, well, I'll do it, because I wanted it badly enough that I said, well, I'll put up with that. Other times, there have been situations where I've said, no. Towards the end of my career in production, when I was offered films that I didn't think were exciting or interesting or would in any way advance my career, I just sort of said, no, I think I won't. I think I'll do something else. And was lucky enough to be able to say those things, but everybody has to kind of think about that at some point and make those decisions for themselves. But yeah, Bradley Scott the Wise. Cool. So, I've got an answer. So, John Skull, you say, for you, it's about having fun and doing it because I have a passion for it. Well, that's a pretty good reason for doing things, isn't it? I'm all about doing that. But again, I mean, I had my fun. I had my time in the big studios, and I got to work on a lot of really cool projects. So it's easy for me to say, it's like, oh, just do it for fun. No, I was very ambitious when I was young. I was, like a lot of people my age, I was just convinced I wanted to be the next Steven Spielberg. And I still hear people say that today, students. They're like, oh, I want to be the next Steven Spielberg. And I always think, wow, that one's been going for a really long time. I don't even know what he's doing these days. I've lost track of him. But what I meant is I saw his films and I said, I want to do that. And I think that still happens today, and I think it's great. I think it's valid. So that was one thing I wanted. As I got further and further into my career, what I realized I wanted to do was be able to do the kind of projects I was interested in, to have the resources and the skills to be able to invest all the energy I'd done in other people's projects in my career into my own projects. And at that point, my career changed a little bit, and it became more about working to finance and support the projects I was interested in. But I think that was valid too. So I'm a big fan of doing things because you're excited about doing them, but that's not always the case. Sometimes you just got to work and you got to live. And there are other reasons to do projects for other people than just you got to have money. You may be learning. You may be in a process where you need to learn more about your craft, and so you learn on the job. It's a great way to learn. And then maybe someday you take all the things that you've learned and apply them to your own projects. So anyway, going on and on about that. So let's see. So you're focusing heavily on sci-fi. Yep. Creating characters. It's cool. Goal is to create a world, shared universe. It's cool. It's happening right now. So I always say this. I know John Skull, you're probably sick of hearing it, but just keep at it. Keep doing it. If you love it, then there's no reason to stop doing it. And it's just a matter of time. They have to find a place for you someday, right? Just persistence is about, I don't know if it's 90% of Hollywood or if it's entertainment or if it's less, but persistence is a lot of working in the entertainment industry. For example, I tried to get one of my shows financed for years. It didn't work. So I financed it myself. I just did it. And I was thrilled with the results. So persistence. And I came up with the idea when I was a 19-year-old. And I did it when I was I finally actually did the project when I was in my 40s. So, so there you go. Persistence, just not giving up, just sticking around long enough. I don't know if that's how I ended up sticking around in animation. Again, I had a pretty good time of it in animation. I was there at the right time. But persistence is real important. So, Kevin, you think it's fun, passion's good, but won't be the case if you're homeless. Yeah, and I say that all the time. So this is addressing the idea of, well, what's success for you? You do have to live. And I say a lot, it's like, do what you love and love what you do. But what if you just have to pay the rent? What if you just have to get through it? So there is that. And there have been many times where I was like, I would love to do this, but I really just have to work. So that's part of being an adult and being responsible, is learning that you can't always just do the things you love to do. But if you're persistent, you'll keep your goal in mind and you'll stay on target, knowing that you're just waiting for your chance, biding your time. Again, right before I did my shows, I was pretty low, didn't have a lot of resources, but I thought, well, but when I'm back, I'm going to do them. And that is what happened. So just staying in the game, it's kind of like gambling in some ways, is you know that you're going to win eventually if you can just stay in the game long enough. Well, Hollywood's not quite as bad as gambling, depending on what part of it you're in. And so maybe you can stay in the game longer. So Bradley, you want to tell stories that leave an impact on people. Success, someone's telling a story made their day better. Ah, that's a very noble pursuit, Bradley Radels. It's one of those things where, on the surface of it, it's like, well, you can do that right now, but I know what you mean. There's a party that's like, well, I want to have reach. I want to actually impact people, and that's going to require having an audience. I think it was, I know he's not talked about nicely too much anymore, but I think it was John Cristofalusi who said something to the effect, in actually a really nasty language, but he said something to the effect that if you're creating just for yourself, you're not actually creating anything worthwhile, because no one sees it and you should share it. I mean, I don't think he said it quite like that. He was actually really harsh in the way he said it. He used words that I won't use here, but because that's just who he was. But his idea was just like, don't just create things in a void, create things to share with the idea that you're going to have an audience, because why not? And I was like, oh, fair enough. But yeah, that's how I felt too. It's like I just wanted to tell stories, and I have a lot to, getting back to the question of success, for me it was communicating. So communicating ideas and getting them shared and out there. That was what I considered success, and I've had it in spades. And then other perks came with it too. So, but yeah, it's a pretty good goal. John Sco, you want to make your projects unique, something that's not been done before. Making the world R-rated, isn't it already? I don't know, you guys. I mean, I guess when you're living where you are today, it's one of the things about passing through different stages of your life, is you don't know what's coming until you get there, and then you look back and you go, oh, okay, that happened. But you know, having lived through several stages of life, I can tell you the world's changed a lot, and it's pretty amazing how I don't even know how to say anything without incriminating myself, but it's pretty amazing how things have changed, and things are a lot more gruesome, gritty, dark, and R-rated than I would have ever imagined in my lifetime when I was younger. So you got your wish. Now I get it. I get what you're saying. That's cool. But yeah, one thing I know, that the best directors that I know of, and that includes the ones that I've met, and I've met some really cool class. I think that you guys wouldn't know any of them, but I've met some really cool directors and got to hang out with them and talk a little bit. And they always had singular visions. So what was his name? Ronald Neame directed the Poseidon Adventure, among other things. And then I don't even remember the dude's name, but the guy who directed the original Willy Wonka, he was the one who came up to me and he said, "Young man, I believe that Beavis and Butthead is possibly the most important cultural icon of the 1990s," or something like that. And we all just sat there. I was in my 20s. I was still getting started. And I'm like, did the guy who just directed Willy Wonka tell us that he thinks Beavis and Butthead is the coolest thing that ever existed? And we were like, yep. I'm like, nah, raise a beer to him. He's cool. And I don't know if he was right or wrong, and I'm not sure he even believed what he was saying. I think he was just talking. But no, that was Ronald Neame. He's the one that had a British accent. I don't know. Anyway, it's all mixed up. But the point was, is he really loved Beavis and Butthead, and I thought that was pretty fun. But the point is, bringing it up is to say that, you know, the directors I've known who have been the most memorable are the ones who really had a passionate vision of the world and who were able to convey that vision in their work. And their work would maintain a consistency because they just didn't compromise. They saw the world a certain way, and that is how their films worked. Chief among them being, in my mind, Stanley Kubrick, and then Ken Russell, who I did get to meet, and obviously Spielberg and company. Who really not only did they, Spielberg and Lucas, not only, mostly Spielberg, that they got to make their movies, but they also changed the world with the way that their movies looked and felt, and everybody wanted to try and capture that. And Stranger Things, you still see it echoing today. It's just, it was a vision that they had. But here's another question for you: when you see something successful, do you think of it as being the product of one person, or is it the product of many, many craftspeople who came together and created it as a unit? But it was done with all these disparate parts. Think about the fact that movies, games, shows, everything is created out of parts. There's never a time when it's just one person toiling away, unless it's a short project that you do yourself. But I'm talking about the movies and shows and games and things you guys like. Do you think of them as being something that was created by one person, or do you think of them as this was a team effort and every single facet of the production was essential, or it wouldn't have turned out the same? I'm not going to answer that question because I don't have an answer for it. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I go back and forth. There's this thing called the auteur theory, where it's one director, and the director is all, like, let's say Alfred Hitchcock, and it's his project, and it's going to be a Hitchcock movie through and through. It's an ancient reference, but you get it. It's pretty. He's still around. I mean, in cultural terms, but Spielberg, J.J. Abrams, Kubrick, a lot of people know him still. It's like, well, did he do everything himself? Is that why the movies looked the way they did? Or did he have a dedicated team who felt the same way he felt about the things he was creating? How is it that a project that's made out of all these different elements with all these hundreds of people working on it, how does it end up looking like a director's singular vision? And is it important to know that, or is it something that doesn't really matter? It's like, well, it happened, so who cares? Again, I'm not going to answer that. I'm curious what you guys think. But it's something to think about as you start off on your career in trying to create entertainment. Is what is more important? Is it the auteur behind the scenes, or is it all the people who put it together to make sure that that vision got fulfilled? Or there's a combination of both. So, and let's see. Superpowers, figure out which powers and abilities you want in characters. Yeah, well, that's the fun part. The fun part is coming up with all the superpowers for your characters, right? I hope it is. It should be. And if you're having fun, then everybody has fun. It's been something I've noticed, is when a project is fun to work on, it ends up being a fun project to watch, generally. So let's say that you determine what it is that you want, and you've decided what your measure of success is, and you get your break, and for whatever reason you're able to get in and get your start in whatever it is that you wanted to do. Let me ask you this: how do you stay there? What if, for example, you have the greatest idea that ever existed? How do you follow that up? I'm thinking back to M. Night, I always mess his name up, Shyamalan, The Sixth Sense, and how when that came out, it was a really revolutionary project. Again, it's ancient history now, but I think people still know who he is and talk about his stuff. But trust me, when it came out, if you weren't around, it was a huge, huge deal. And the thing is after that film came out, everybody kind of went, all right, great. What else you got? What's next? So you have to be ready for that if you want to be somebody who works in a project based environment for a living. If you want to work on entertainment projects, there's going to come a time where projects end. So even if you've got the best idea in the entire world, at a certain point, your project comes to an end. And then what? I always tell people that you should have a suitcase virtual course on a computer, probably most likely, but you should have a repository of ideas so that when you get your chance, so for you, John Skull, when you get your chance with the rock and you present your idea and the rock says, for example, which happens, just warning you, says, oh, that's an okay idea, but what else do you have? You've got 15 minutes. I'm going to listen to you. I've got time to tell me your ideas. That idea was okay, let's just say, but what else you got? And at that point, you have to have projects that prove that you are actually serious about whatever it is you want to do. So in my case, as an animator, it's like, okay, we did something really cool with one piece of animation. What else can you do? What else do you want to do? And show us that you're somebody who's not just a flash in the pan. Or another way of looking at it is show yourself that you're just not just a flash in the pan. I can't tell you how many people I know who write one script and think that that makes them a script writer, or one book, or write chapters of the book and say, well, I'm a writer. But how do you prove you're a writer unless you've got scads of things that you've written and it proves that you love to write? So just something to think about as you go about your business of trying to decide what success means to you. Well, once you attain it, then what? Success can be you got in a studio, it could be you got a deal to produce something and it's great and you love it, you bask in it and have a lot of fun, or whatever it is, or it's a lot of work, whatever. But there's going to come a time when that project ends. And I know I'm jumping the cart before the horse a little bit. It's like, well, wait till I at least get my idea out there. But while you're still in the planning stages, which is what you should be doing right now while you're waiting for your big break, you should be thinking about, well, what if I did get my break and I did have some success? Where would I go from there? There's a great book. It's really hard to read. It's really long and very dense. And it's a lot of history, but it's called The Laws of Power. I think it's like something like the 34 Laws of Power or something. Somebody turned me onto this book when I was at DreamWorks towards the end of my tenure there and said, you just got to read this book. It tells you everything you need to know about business. And one of the things it taught me, it's a pretty harsh book. It's probably more if you're interested in getting into Wall Street or something. But one of the things that I learned from it was set a goal for yourself, make it realistic, something that you can actually attain. And once you attain it, stop and do something else. And it took me a while to kind of understand that. It's like, well, I don't get it. What do you mean, just stop? It's like, well, no. Look around, realize you got what you wanted. You set out to get something, got a goal. And having attained that goal, admit that you got it, have fun, enjoy it, but stop. Move on. Set another goal. Do something else. The worst thing that you can do is, again, to use the analogy of gambling, is be at a gambling game of some kind, and you've just won a big, huge payout that's very unrealistic, and then you say, well, I'm on a lucky streak, I'm just going to keep going. What is most likely to happen is that you will lose everything that you fought so hard for or got lucky and got. So at a certain point, you need to set goals for yourself and then say, that is what success means to me. Once I have it, I'll do something else. I'll set another goal and start working towards that. Thank you, Bradley. Yes, 48 Laws of Power. I think his name's Greenlaw. I read it after I was invited to leave DreamWorks. I was kind of bitter. I read that book and it helped me so much. It's not something I would live my life by, but that helped me too, to understand that that is something that I couldn't live up to that. And again, I think it's more about Wall Street or politics or wars or something. But just scanning the table of contents, if it's something you're interested in, you would be surprised how much you'll learn just by reading it, contents. And so the whole point of bringing that up was just to say, is set goals for yourself, and when you've attained those goals, move on to the next one. Set more goals for yourself. Don't rest on your laurels. Don't think that there's ever comes a time where you can go, okay, I'm rich and famous, I don't need to do anything anymore. It's like, no, even those people do things. And the people that I know I have known some people who are really wealthy and well-to-do, and they don't know what to do with themselves. And I don't know that they're having a lot of fun for all that. So, have goals and reach them and hit them. And once you've hit them, make more goals. And what else are you going to do with your time, right? So, anyway, getting a little bit out there, but anyway, Vanessa, Disney should read that book, move on from live action. Oh, that's funny. Well, I would suspect that a lot of the CEOs at Disney had read that book at the time when the book was popular back in 2000 something. It was a primer for people in business, and at the time, it was a very good time to be a CEO at Disney. And so I'm pretty sure that they read it. And the person who turned me on to the book was actually hungry for power and attained it briefly and then lost it all. And probably should have read the book a little bit closer. But, oh well. So, soccer fans, I don't know what you're asking. If it's a serious question and you're not a bot, maybe rephrase the question. If you are a bot, you won't be here much longer. All right. So anyway, so to review, yeah, you want to just decide for yourself what success is, and then how do you attain it will come, and then once you've attained it, move on. But speaking of the topic of, okay, well, let's say that you've gotten yourself into a situation, you're pretty happy with it. What are some things that you can do to keep your situation that you're happy with? Let's say you get into a company, you're working on a company, or you're in something. So anyway, let's say that you got into a company. So one of the first things that you should do, this is, listen up, children, because this is important stuff here. The first thing you should do whenever you get into a company is you should find somebody who will be your friend, who's got a modicum of power. You need to find somebody who is cool, who is powerful, who will speak up for you and carry you with them wherever they go. There is really no other way to be successful than to have somebody who will, they call it, advocate for you. And I've seen the results of both having someone like that and not having someone like that, and there really is one of the most important things you can do. The problem is you can't fake it. A relationship at work is no different than any other relationship. Some are meant to be, some aren't, and you can't fake the ones that aren't, and you can't force the ones that aren't. But if you know going into a situation that you need to find someone who is a powerful individual who will look out for you and put you under their wing, if you know that going in, then you're more apt to find that because you've got that on your mind, just like any other goal. It's like, oh, well, I need to find that person. Well, then if you're thinking you should need to find it, then you will. And that person will protect you when times get rough. They'll keep you abreast of what's happening if you're in a studio environment, and can also be instrumental in helping you raise in whatever it is you want to do when the time comes. Let's say that you have an advocate and somebody who's, a pillar of a studio or something. Well, when they decide to retire, who do you think they're going to recommend? Right? It's going to be somebody that they trust and like, and they'll be pushing you if that's who you are. So you must find somebody who will advocate for you, who will look out for you and keep you posted on what's happening in the company and help you when times change. The next thing that you should do is you should find somebody who is an informant for the company. Usually that person will be somebody who sits at the front desk or answered phones. That person will always have their finger on the pulse of what's happening at the studio, if that's where you're working, or the company. And if you're friends with them, they'll gossip and they'll tell you what's going on. And you'll be one of the first people to know when things may not be going so well at the company and they're thinking of doing layoffs, and you can plan appropriately. Or you'll be the first to know when things are going well, as I have found out a lot of times, and can position yourself so that you can benefit from the wonderful things happening at the company because you knew ahead of time what was going to happen, because you've been informed. And so, yeah, so two things: find yourself an advocate, and then make friends with people who are connected to the studio, who like to talk and will tell you what's going on with the studio so that you aren't captured unawares. The worst thing that can happen is that you're complacent, that you find yourself at a company you really like, working at a job you really like, and you go, great, this is my life now. I'm just going to enjoy this and relax and have fun. And then something happens and you didn't expect it, and it affects your career somehow. You don't want to be that person. You always have to have an eye on what's happening if you're going to be a professional, particularly in the entertainment industry. Doesn't mean you can't relax and have fun. Usually you relax in the middle of a project before it gets into the crazy overtime and after it's been set up. Although you can relax when it's getting set up, sometimes it's fun. But I always found the middle of the production was the best part. But you need to have somebody who will advocate for you, so when the production's over, they'll take you with them or speak up on your behalf. And you need to have someone who's an informant who will tell you what's going on in the studio that they aren't telling you. Just so you know, nothing against HR, but HR looks out for human resources, that is, looks out for the company. That's all their goal is. They'll tell you to come to them with your problems. What they mean is, great, now we know who the problem person is in the studio. You don't want to count on them for anything. You just want somebody who's cool in the studio, probably a seasoned veteran who just doesn't care anymore and likes to talk. And then you want to chat them up, become friends with them if you can. If you can't, don't worry about it. Find somebody else. And then eventually you'll have somebody who will keep you posted on what's happening in the business, in the world, in the studio. And those are two fantastic things that you can do to help yourself in your career, particularly when you're first getting started in the business. Find those people and you'll eliminate a lot of the stress that new employees find when they haven't proven themselves yet. So, goal is to create your world. Time down to college. You don't want to rush it. Yeah. Well, you still have time, Drawn Skull. If you're still in college, you still have time. Keep it going. Kevin, what thing times animation does not pay well? Please tell me it's not true. Let me come back to that one. Pay. Well, hello, Riz Wanimation. Welcome back. Wanimation, welcome back. It's nice to see you again. See, James. Seems like they're your inspirations. Cool. Yeah, well, those are great inspirations, Drawn Skull. So Kevin, you asked about the pay. Well, when you say the industry, that means a lot of different things. And so the sort of topic of coin, it's different for everyone. And that's one of the things that I love to talk about is, well, what happens when someone comes up to you and says, all right, what's your price? So I'll talk about that in a second, but does it pay well? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Some factions pay more than others. I'm not going to speak for any particular anything, but let me just say that some companies are cranking product out and they don't pay very well, but they offer an opportunity to work on projects. So maybe it's worth doing for a little while when you're getting your feet wet. The studios I worked for, the first group of studios I worked for, small or large, were union studios. As a result, I got full benefits, which is becoming more and more important every day, that you have that if you can get it. And they had union mandates about how much we could work, and they paid very well. It's like if you are for example, junior animator, cleanup person, whatever, you make X amount of dollars. And that was a union mandated thing. There were people who kept tabs on that, and it was actually really wonderful. I took it for granted for many years. And then I moved into special effects, which does not have a union, but fortunately stumbled on a studio that mimicked that situation. Rhythm and Hues, they were excellent about taking care of us and giving us health packages, health benefits for doctors and things. I never used it when I was young, obviously. I didn't go to the doctor ever when I was young, but as I got older, it was great to have that. But Rhythm and Hues had no qualms about working us on Sundays, on holidays, whatever it took to get a project done. They were cognizant of the fact that they couldn't do that to us all the time. I don't know that some studios, gaming studios, I'm not going to mention names, but have been known to work people without overtime, force them to be on constant overtime and never get a minute's rest. Everybody knows about the debacle that was Cats, the movie where the special effects crew had to work really hard to make a movie that got lambasted for a lot of things, including effects. And, that's just heartbreaking. It's really the ugly side of things. But I'll just say I was always very well paid, and I got to go to Europe. I got to buy a house. I got to buy cars, eat out a lot, take trips. One thing is when you're working all the time, you don't have time to enjoy the money that you make. You just sock it away because you're working all the time, for better or worse. But I found it, even in my last jobs, it was paying really well. Towards the end, one of the reasons I left was because the money that they were offering me to work on a show, I won't say what, but it was so low it didn't actually make any sense to work there. And that's one of the reasons I eventually got out of production, was just determining that if it's not going to pay well, and the projects aren't that exciting, then I think I won't. But for the majority of my career, I was very well paid, handsomely paid, specifically in cleanup. I kind of couldn't believe it. It was like the coolest job in the world. So I don't, I'm not out there right now on the front lines, but I know lots of people who are working in the business and getting paid really well. And so I don't want to say it doesn't pay well. It's just everybody's experience is going to be a little bit different. Well, good for you, animation. You got the Lance Peter in 3D. I can't remember if you're taking CG Spectrum classes or not, if you're doing that for part of the class, but good for you. That's really fun. You look for, I remember John Scotti like Spawn and Mike Mignola. That's really cool. And Christopher Nolan's great. Look for inspiration from Rob Zombie. But what's Zombie doing lately? I didn't see the last one he did. I know he did I think he did a sequel to, another sequel to the Clan from House of Thousand Corpses or whatever that was, and Devil's Rejects, but I didn't see it. So I don't know. It's funny. He reminds me of other directors who are like, I'm just going to keep making movies, and somehow just keeps making movies, which I think is great. That's like the auteur theory to the nth degree. I don't care if my films are successful or not. I'm just going to keep making them because I feel like making them. I remember watching the El Super Bisto cartoon he did and thinking, how on earth did you get this made? It costs, speaking of 2D, it costs money to make 2D animation. He partnered up with whatever that studio was. And he's like, nope, I want to make a cartoon. And he did. So good for him. Is Toon Boom subscription based? Yes. Yes, it is. It's a monthly fee. I don't work for Toon Boom. I don't endorse them. I don't not endorse them. We chose them for CG Spectrum classes because we had to choose something. And the person I created the lessons with was a Toon Boom instructor by trade and knew the program inside and out and got me up to speed on it. And I was really impressed with all the tools it has available. And so we went with Toon Boom. I have mixed feelings about it. Sometimes technically I'm not impressed, and I think that that's the case with any program. When you push things to their limit, to the point where they break, it's disappointing. But Yeah, we use Toon Boom, and it's a monthly fee, and then there are different tiers, which I also think is annoying. So one of the benefits, plug time, one of the benefits of working with CG Spectrum is we get you Toon Boom for as long as you're working on working with the school. As long as you're a student, you get Toon Boom in the 2D department. You get it, and the school pays for it, and it's the premier version, the top tier one, whatever that is, platinum or something like that. So that's one of the perks that comes with the school, is you get to have that at least as long as you're a student. And after that, you're kind of on your own. So and you know, it's the same thing with the cloud. It's like they have to make their money. The Adobe Cloud, they have to make their money, so you've got to give it up. It's, how else are they going to make a living at this stuff unless they charge? I just don't know that they need to charge such exorbitant fees, but you know, that's why there's student rates and things and discounts for instructors and students. And then if you're a working professional, I guess you factor it into your expenses, so that's something to think about. But yes, Toon Boom, monthly, and they have different tiers. So Rob Zombie making the crow. So, well, that's cool. Well, I guess a bunch of people complain about that. They always complain whenever Rob Zombie makes his films. So he didn't do them justice. I don't know. People often ask me, well, what do you think about these live action remakes of Disney animated classics? And my feeling is I've gotten very zen over the years. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to stop it? You're going to picket? Walk outside theaters and say, no, this is wrong. I'm like, hey, if that's what people want, that's what people want. When I was young, I liked a lot of things that people thought were offensive. I mean, Spielberg films, a lot of my friends, and Star Wars films, the early ones, the 77 to 84 ones, people were like, oh, that's just garbage, it's junk. These aren't real movies, these are just commercial enterprises made to make money and then sell out all the coolness of like real science fiction. So a lot of my friends came from the world of, I'm trying to think of good examples, but Westworld, the original, not the TV show that's on, that came out some years ago, but this old movie called Westworld with Yul Brynner as a robot cowboy, and I don't know, I can't even think of Soylent Green, Planet of the Apes. People were like, now that's real sci-fi. It's bleak, nihilistic, dark, makes you think. And then along comes Star Wars, which is just a shoot 'em up. And we've been reacting to that ever since. The world is still not recovered from the appearance of Star Wars and just how huge it was. And some people are like, that's not real sci-fi, that's just garbage. You know, fair enough. But my feeling is, and so the same thing with Lion King, they're like, wow, the film came out, the new one, it was a hit, and how do we think of that now in terms of the first film, which was the cartoon, which was the 2D animated version, which was a world-changing hit? You know, does this one have the same value that that one has? Well, here's the answer. When it comes to classics, a classic is something that's weathered the test of time and is still around. And so in another 20, 30 or more years, if people are talking about the live action version of Lion King and not the 2D one, then it won. It's plain and simple. and if they're talking about the other one, then that won. And then if they're not talking about either, then neither one of them won. For example, Gone with the Wind, it was making headlines this year for its content being a little bit dodgy in light of modern cultural norms. But they're still talking about Gone with the Wind. The film's like 1 million years old. And so that is considered a true classic in the sense that it's still a topic of conversation all these years later. You can't even imagine how old that film is, and they're still talking about it. Or, I don't know, Charlie Chaplin, on and on, books, movies, you know, it's weathered the test of time. People are still talking about these things. So same thing with the projects. Will people be talking about, I don't know, something, will they still be talking about Thor 2 in 30 years? I don't know, maybe they will. It remains to be seen, and I don't really care. but in terms of how do you define a classic? That's kind of how I define it. It's weathered the test of time. People are still interested in it, and then it becomes a classic. Again, for those of you trying to get into the business, persistence. Think about Paul McCartney, who still tours. Well, he was before we shut everything down. But you know, there's kind of the definition of a classic. Just had a new album come out. I didn't listen to it, but yeah, there's an example of someone who's persisted in the extreme, still around, still doing something. So, and British animation, Lion King live action does not work. Now, that's a different question. Do I think it's successful or not successful? You know, what are my feelings on it? Well, that's a whole other topic. There's two different things. One is, was it, you know, how do you evaluate it in terms of quality and whether or not people agreed with it or liked it, or how much effort went into it. I always say that about the new version of it. It's like, well, at the very least, Lion King went through all these changes, the 2D one from '94, and there was a lot of thought and a lot of love put into making sure it was the way it was. And with the new one, they copied. But again, if you had never seen the original, and I know a lot of people who didn't, who are young people now, who are like, well, I saw that one first and I liked it. It's like, well, should they not like it? You know, people like what they like. And so it's certainly not up to me, thankfully, to make distinctions about, well, that should stay or that should go. And you'll find when you work in the entertainment industry, what you will inevitably find is you're going to work on things that you like, and then you're going to sometimes work on things that you don't. And you have to kind of get good at going, well, all right, this isn't my dream project, but I'm still enjoying the process. I still like what I do. For example, I really liked working on Dorado. That was one of my favorite films to work on in a 2D sense. And it went on for a really long time. And so it was like a year and a half, maybe close to 2 years on that thing. And it was just happiness every day. Then the next one, which was, I think, Spirit, I liked it, but I wasn't in love with it. It was hard drawing horses, and there was a lot of inner turmoil going on at the studio at the time, and it was kind of a little more problematic. Well, there was a lot of stuff going on for El Dorado too, a lot of politics and stuff in the studio, but I just had a ball with El Dorado. And then in Spirit, not so much. I ended up getting shingles at the end of it because I worked too hard. Lesson number 653, don't push it too hard. For your own work, for anybody else's work, it's not ever worth jeopardizing your health. Just keep reminding yourself of that as you go, please. Don't blow out your hand. Don't blow out your back. Don't blow out your brains. I mean, in a very mental, don't overwhelm yourself. That didn't come out so nice, but you know what I mean? Just don't overwhelm yourself. Don't give any more than you can afford to lose. And when you're negotiating, or when someone asks you what your worth is with the intent of hiring you or something, take care of yourself. Know what you're worth. Know what you think you are worth, and stand up for yourself. Because even if you hire someone, like we hired some lawyers, they're not as vested in you as you are. So take care of yourselves. All right, so you guys, I'm philosophical tonight. Sorry about that. All right, any tips on world building and creating characters that you should look for? Well, the best advice I can give you in terms of that is know what's come before. When you're world building, it's important that you understand that you're not the first person to do it, and you don't want to just recreate something someone else has done. For example, Tolkien, it's been done. It's been done and done and done. And I see people all the time coming up with the land of the elves and the trolls and the wargs and the orcs and stuff. And there's a great quest to find, this object that has special powers and stuff. It's just been done, and so no one's going to get too excited about that. Doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means look at it, think about what your special spin on it is, and put your personality into it so that you create something that no one else has done before. And that really is the secret to most things. You can retell the story of Romeo and Juliet, but because you did it, it'll come out in your version. You look at things and you think about the things that you like, and forget about the things you don't like in the story, say, such as Romeo and Juliet. And then that becomes your version of the story. And nothing's new. Everything's been done. The Greeks and Romans did it all millions of years ago. So the best you can do is inject your unique personality into whatever it is you do. So again, don't try to copy the others. Think about the things that excite you the most and do it your way when you're trying to create worlds. And you should just be just fine. Do you have a stage in Toon Boom? You have a stage in Toon Boom. Not really sure what that means, but I worked on Spirit, yeah. It's too bad it was so much work. Well, Spirit was a labor of love, and the fact that I got shingles on it was simply a matter of I was happy to work on that film and give it everything I had. I got to work directly with James Baxter. Some people might know him. I mean, everybody got to work with him who worked on the character of Spirit. But I got to hang out with him in his office, and he'd look at my work and give me pointers and things, and that was just gold. So yeah, it was very much a labor of love. It was difficult because we really wanted to nail the look and feel of a real horse with personality. But the fact that I feel we really did it, and people really love that film, is a testament, I think, to how much work we put into it. And that's what I like, is when the work pays off like that. As somebody was saying earlier, when I hear people say, oh, I was really touched by that film, that I grew up with it, I loved it, made me cry, whatever. And you know that you had a piece of it, of helping someone experience that emotion. And it's a really good feeling. So Riz Animation, you're just interested in 3D animation. Well, guess what? I do 3D animation too. So I kind of oversee the 3D animation and 2D animation at CG Spectrum, but I worked in 3D for many years and did both character stuff at DreamWorks and then creature effects like Life of Pi and Golden Compass, and Cabin in the Woods was another favorite film of mine that I worked on. And so yeah, I love 3D animation as well, and I talk about it here a lot because I think that what's coming is a hybridization, if that's the right word, of 2D and 3D. Now, those of you who are out there right now trying to come up with new ideas, I'm looking at you, John Skull, understand that you want to know what the technologies are. So for example, right now, Unreal Engine is becoming a thing. Does that mean you have to race out and learn it? Not necessarily, but you have to know that that's a thing and people are talking about it, and you know about it because you're excited about motion graphics. And that's what's happening right now in motion graphics. And so you know about it. And then when someone says, hey, what about this world that you built? You say, well, yeah, I built it in Unreal Engine. And then they go, boom, talk to me, tell me some more. So that's just one way that you can consider getting yourself noticed, is because you're up on what's happening in the real world, and you're not just resting on the laurels of whatever happened last time. You're always looking forward to the future. 2.5D games are coming into style. I'm not even sure what a 2.5D game is. That's really cool. Maybe you can tell me about that, Vanessa. To Riz Animation, yes, I worked at DreamWorks. I worked on all their 2D animated films. So that's what Prince of Egypt, worked on Moses, El Dorado, I drew Miguel. I mean, along with everybody else, it's hundreds of us. And then, or dozens of us anyway at that point. And then after that was Spirit. I worked on the character of Spirit. After that was Sinbad, and I worked on Sinbad, and I worked on Proteus, his buddy. Then after that I transferred to CG animation, worked on Shark Tale, Over the Hedge, and Flushed Away, in this little thing called Hammy's Great Adventure or something like that, Over the Hedge. There's a little short that went with it on the DVD, I think. And then after that, I moved into creature effects and worked on Golden Compass, Night at the Museum 2, the Hulk movie in 2000 and whatever, 8. It's part of the current canon, even though it's an old movie now. And finished up with Life of Pi, but also worked on some horror films and stuff in between. So, but yeah, no, I worked at DreamWorks, worked at Disney, worked on films that were related to Disney and DreamWorks outside of their outsourced studios. I was there at Disney during the Renaissance era in the 90s, which everybody likes to talk about. So Riz Animation, you just work by yourself. Well, I mean, we're kind of all working by ourselves right now, aren't we? Well, depending on where you're from, I guess things are starting to open up a little bit. I always say that in my classes, I always say that animation is a great job for anybody who's kind of considers themselves an introvert, which I always did. It's a great job to do if you like spending time with yourself and plugging into your world with your headphones and just listening to things or watching things and not being bothered. What I don't often mention is, unfortunately, you also have to be good at communicating. Have to, that's a funny word, have to, you know, maybe it's just a good idea to be good at communicating, but at some point I had to learn how to talk to people and be conversant and not be so afraid to speak in public, for example, or whatever. And the way that I was able to do that was by getting a job at Disneyland. I always tell people that if you want to break out of your shell and not be shy anymore, work on the Jungle Cruise ride at Disneyland, where you have to hold a mic in front of your face and drive a boat and talk to people and entertain them as they go down the fake river with plastic animals. And you'll never be shy again. You'll be free of your shyness. It's trial by fire. That's not true. I mean, everybody has their different journey, and I don't want to speak for anyone, but that was certainly my case. I was the shyest person on the planet up to when I was in college, and then I worked at the Jungle Cruise, and I wasn't shy anymore. So, 3D models works on 2 axes, like Super Mario Bros. Okay, cool. Quite a few indie studios are using it. Style helps them stand out. Oh, that's cool. All right, 2.5D. That's cool. I'm trying to think if I know of any examples of that, but that's a cool buzzword. I'll look that one up later. Thank you, Vanessa. Riz Animation. Yes, I'm in California. I'm in the wilds of the outside of Los Angeles. I'm basically like in countryside. We just had 2 wild owls move into our neighborhood, and we've been watching them hang out. It's really cool. So I lived many years right in the heart of Studio City, and would bike to work every day to go to Disney Studios. First when they worked in Glendale in warehouses, and then when they built this really cool building for us all. So it was, I don't like to toot my own horn too much because it's not like I had anything to do with it. I was there when it was happening, but I was there when the Disney Studio building, the feature animation building, which is still currently home to the artists who make the movies, when it was new. They built it for us. I had just been hired on Pocahontas, and they said, hey, we got this new building. Do you want to come take a tour? I was working so hard I couldn't take the tour, and I figured, well, I'm going to live there soon, so I can wait. And every time I drive by there, or whenever I drive by there, I just stop and think of all the people who've come and gone from that studio over the years, and the different people who've had experiences, good, bad, or indifferent. But I was in the group that was there first, and for all the changes, it's like, well, it's still there. And that was just a bit of a landmark. It's kind of cool. It's fun to be able to say that I was there when it all started during that era. And then I was also there when DreamWorks built their campus. I don't know what's going to happen to that campus. I keep hearing things like, oh, it got sold, oh, it's this, oh, it's that. Who knows, maybe they'll tear it down someday or turn it into a strip mall or something, but I was there when they built it for us, and we all ran over there and saw our offices, and oh, it was so exciting. And I just spent hours and hours and hours of my life at that studio. It was just my second home, probably my first home. I spent more time there than I did at my actual home, my apartment at the time, because that's where my friends were, that's where my work was, and we worked a lot of hours. And I was there when the place was just getting started. Remember, they had a problem with the tiles cracking all the time at DreamWorks when they for some reason had gotten tiles and they didn't quite think it through, and so the tiles would always crack, and we would have a good laugh seeing them getting worked on every single day. Another thing, there were spiders in the back balcony where a lot of us would hang out, and every night they'd clear out the spiders, and every day the spiders would be back. That was kind of fun. So, wow, fun facts about DreamWorks that nobody cares about. But it was fun initially to be there when the cafeteria opened. It's like, oh, free lunch. I think they still do it. I don't know if they still do it for guests like they used to, but I brought some people there to visit 10 years ago or so, and they were still offering free lunch, which is cool. All right, you're in Huntsville, Alabama. Well, nowadays, I think that you can be wherever you want to be. Used to be you had to move to Hollywood if you wanted to be successful back on target. You had to be here because this is where everything was happening. And I even moved to Studio City initially because it's just, that was the heart, the nerve center of what was happening. And you had to be ready to pick up, be able to come into a studio at any given time if you got a job there. So for example, I went from my first job at Bear Animation, right next to Universal Studios, to a place in Burbank, Rich Animation, working on the Swan Princess, to Disney, to DreamWorks, all of them within a few miles of each other, and I biked to all of them. And that's because I lived in Studio City, and so Disney called me up and said, hey, can you come in like Monday? And if I had been living out of the state or something, for example, I wouldn't have been able to do that. But because I was right there, I was able to just pack my stuff up and go, yep, sure, I'll show up on Monday with my box of stuff. Back then that meant a boom box. You had to bring a boom box to work to have something to listen to. Now we just can stream everything. We didn't have computers then. Back when covered wagons were running the planes, as I always say. But nowadays it doesn't seem like that's the case. And if not this year, then next year or the next, or in the next few years, I think you're going to find more and more that people can work from wherever they are. And the studios will love it because they don't have to pay liability to have people on site. And then people who live in other places will love it because they don't have to uproot and move. So we'll see. It's still, I've been saying this is going to happen for years. The lockdowns kind of forced everybody's hands and made everybody work from home who could. And as a result, they proved it's possible. And because it's possible, I bet you money we're going to see it more and more. And here's the thing too. The antithesis of that was when they did one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. They were able to do it in X amount of months and proved that that was possible. And we all had chills run down our spines. It's like, oh, now they're going to want us to do that every time. I didn't work on Pirates of the Caribbean movies. I just was in the business, and somebody had said, oh, did you hear? They finished one of them. I don't know, it's like the 4th or 5th or 10th one, late in the series. Did you hear that they were able to do it in like 4 months from start to finish? We went, oh no, now they're going to think that that's possible. And that's what you run up against a lot in special effects films, is faster, cheaper, and better to some degree. But, is the goal, is the mantra. So, all right, said more brilliant Korean characters. Don't do anything that's already been done. Drawn Skull, yeah. So, yeah, you want to. Well, first of all, you can't steal somebody else's IP because you'll have to pay them a fee. You can do something in the style of somebody else's IP and maybe you can get away with it. But if you take their actual characters, you will have to pay them something. And that's why you don't see it happen more often. I'm thinking about, like, what's that movie called? Ready Player One with Spielberg. and you had all those characters in the movie that were from games and movies, and they paid a fortune for all that, and they weren't on screen very long, most of them. So if you use somebody else's stuff, then you're going to have to pay a fee for it, and it's usually really expensive. For example, if you want to do your own short film and you build it around a song that already exists, you're going to have to get the rights first and foremost to use the song, and then you're going to have to pay money every time it plays to whoever owns it. Now again, lest you think that that's evil, well, people who make music gotta eat too. They have to pay the rent, and so all's fair. So using other people's characters will cost you dearly. And the second reason for that, for not doing it, is it's been done. So like I said, The Adventures of Frodo and his 9 fingers or whatever. Well, we've seen it. It exists. If you want to watch Lord of the Rings, it's already out there, or they'll remake it, eventually again. Hollywood's motto is keep doing it until you get it wrong. Just keep making things until they fail. And also, as long as it will make money for the company, they'll make it. Doesn't matter what it is. I've talked about that a lot before. But if you're making something that already exists, or if you're extending something that already exists, you have to consider that it already exists. And people are really fickle. Audiences especially are really fickle. You guys are really fickle. You're very sophisticated these days, viewers who watch things and play things. You don't have a lot of patience for things that aren't going to be exciting and new and fresh. And so think about that. Even if you're doing a mashup or an homage, but you still have to present in a way that's unique and original. So my advice is take the idea that somebody else has done. For example, the Lord of the Rings. I just keep using that one arbitrarily. And then what's your new spin on it you're going to put on it? And how can you reinvent it and make it your own? So that's kind of what your goal is. So just get your superpowers and spiders. You're only using characters in your universe world. Everything's completely original as possible. Yeah, well, good for you. And that's the fun anyway. Most likely, if you get a career in show business in any capacity, you will be working on stuff that has already been kind of set up for you. It's rare, at least when you're getting started, to be the person who comes up with the ideas. It takes time, but be patient. It'll come if you just keep at it, and if you've got a goal. And I've seen it happen, and if I've seen it happen, that means it's possible. So just keep on track with things that you want to do. I always think of it this way, and I know I've said this before, I hate to repeat myself, but just to review, you have, and here I'll have the cat sit here and look at this, you have one stash, one folder of projects that are for everybody, right? And then you have one stash. And so that's just basically if somebody says to you, hey, what do you got? And you go, well, I've got this, 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 and that. Those are projects for everybody, anybody that you'll just give away. And then you have projects that are for some. And then those projects are things that you worked a little harder on, and you would be less likely to just give away for free. You want to keep them a little closer to your chest and not just hand them off at any given time. And then last but not least, you have those few. And these are projects that you've been nurturing for years, that if you pitch it to someone and then they took it, optioned it or something, and then rejected it and you can never sell it again or whatever, it would be a loss because you worked really hard on it and it means a lot to you and you know it's a good idea. And so you want to keep that straight. So in each case, what I'm talking about is you've got like a folder of projects, and each one of these projects folders contain the appropriate contents. So there's one for everyone. That's just log lines and ideas. And once upon a time there was a world where everything was upside down. Ta-da! It just didn't take a lot of thought. And then you have some projects, and those are projects that you put some time into. You've done some serious development on, but they're still things that you would just toss out there and say, well, I want to talk about a world where everybody reads books backwards, or everybody is purple. But there are all these details that I've fleshed out, and all these world building elements that are part of the stories I want to tell with this project. And if they take it and option it, but they reject it, you're like, okay, well, there's more where that came from, but there are ideas that you spend a lot of time on. And then finally, there are the ideas that you keep to yourself until the absolute right moment, because you know you've got something that's really valuable or that you spend a lot of time on. Those are projects you will not just give away. They're like your personal babies, the dream projects and things. Now, what's funny is a lot of people have created these, famous directors and things have gotten their chance to do their baby projects, and they ended up being the worst things ever because they've just had too much freedom. One of the famous ones I remember was back in the 90s was a film called Toys, and with Robin Williams, and it was a pet project, and it was just, well, by most people's accounts, it was not a successful film. I'll just leave it at that. And that was an idea that the director had been trying to get going for years and years. So anyway, just think about that. Don't give everything away. Don't keep everything hidden. Somewhere in the middle, you want to and then you really want to have a lot of content and a big stash of things that you can work. If that's the sort of thing you want to do with your time, is come up with projects and get people to pay for them. Kevin says you love the new Justice League stuff. First, I would love to be able to make something like that one day. Well, again, that's a great segue to what I keep talking about, which is the question of, so why do you want to do it? I know it sounds weird, and it's like, isn't it enough? I just want to do it. Shut up. But no, the question is ask yourself what it is about that you want to do, what you love about it, because someday Throne of Atlantis will be, if not forgotten, it'll give way to something else. And so do you want to just work on that one thing, meaning once that thing isn't in production anymore, then you're not going to do anything else? Or is it something about that project that really makes you feel excited and really gets you going, so that even if that wasn't going, you'd work on something else that's like that? In my case, I was very excited about Dragon's Lair and Space Ace because they were Disney-esque. And I always looked for projects that were sort of a little more offbeat, a little more edgy and interesting, and I worked on a lot of them. The Disney films I worked on were different for Disney, and that was what I was in it for. I really was excited about that. But there won't be another Dragon's Lair. There was going to be another Dragon's Lair, but there won't be now. It's going to be live action, I guess. Another one was Wizards, the Bakshi film in '77. After Cool World, Bakshi was doing pretty well, and he was thinking, I'll do a sequel to Wizards. A lot of people were interested in it at the time. And I was poised to work on that thing. I would have done anything to work on it. I was so excited. But it never happened, and it won't now. And if they did do it, it wouldn't be the same. It's a product of its era. It's really old news now, for all the camp value it has. And so, what about doing things that are like that, or creating my own stuff like that, or whatever? And so it wasn't just that one thing I wanted to work on, not that one intellectual property or that one film, TV show, game, but I want to do stuff like that, and I want to keep doing it because I really, really am excited about certain aspects of it. So it's just something to ask yourself. Just ask yourself what it is that you love about it, and is that something that you could do for other projects? If you were hired to do other things, would you still be excited, or is it, no, I just really wish I had been there for that project? And I'm not going to say they're yay or nay, there are pros and cons to it all, but it's just something to think about when you're still ramping up to the career you want to have. Is going back to what I asked at the very beginning, which is, how do you define success? How would you be able to say, I made it, I did it, this is what I wanted to do, and I did it? For most of you, it's like, well, really, I just want to get my start. I just want to get my chance, and then I'll figure the rest out. But while you're still in that phase, do as I say. Think about what I didn't think about at the time, which is, what's my end game? What is it that I will have when I'm done with this. Is it I'm doing this because I want to have money, or want to have prestige, or I just want to create a lot of great art? You know, they're all valid. It's not about right or wrong. But I recommend that you think it out, because then you've got a goal. And once you have a goal, you can attain that goal. And everything else, oddly enough, will start to fall in place. Go into it without a goal, and chances are you'll fumble around a lot, and you'll make a lot of mistakes, and that's good. You should make mistakes. But you might waste time that you could have been spending doing the things that you really wanted to do had you thought it out just a little bit more. So just some advice from somebody who's been there and done that, and who's seen a lot of people and their different trajectories of success. I always point out Mike Mitchell, who is a working director who did, I think, Trolls, directed it. I started out in the business with him. We were friends, pals for a little while, just work pals. A lot of people were friends. And I just was amazed at his dedication in just constantly making movies until someone finally let him make a real one, you know, or he convinced them to let him make, pitch them. But it really taught me a lot about that is something he really, really, really wanted to do. And so he kept doing it, and eventually he did it professionally. And I don't know what his goals are now. Like I said, I'm not friends with him. I was friends with him, a work companion 30 years ago, along with a million other people I used to know. He wouldn't know me if he saw me on the street, or even if we met. But I was really impressed with his fortitude, his sense of, I'm going to do this, and he did it, and was successful by anybody's measure. Worked on successful films, and got to do more films, which is what most directors want to do anyway. So anyway, just a great time before you get out there in the crazy world to ask yourself what your success will be for you, and that will help you make up a plan to attain the goals that you want. So there you go. A little philosophical tonight, but I think this stuff's important. It's just stuff I wish I would have thought about a little bit more at the time, or it's people I've seen who don't think about these things, and I've watched them fumble and flail around and waste a lot of time learning things that are just right there. It's right in front of you. If you are paying attention and pay attention to other people and their trajectories and their careers. So again, I offer these things up because I would have appreciated it when I was getting started, and hopefully it helps you guys. We've got around 5 minutes left. If anybody has any last minute questions or comments or concerns or topics. I haven't talked much about what I'm doing here today, but I think it's obvious. I'm doing cleanup. I'm using Toon Boom to clean up the lines of my animation that were created before. I'm adding a nice clean line. I'm going to play this thing again in just a minute or so you can see what I was working on if you showed up late. If you've been in my feeds before, you've seen this already. I've been working on it for a few weeks. I've just got a couple weeks left on it, and I'll move on to another one. But the conversation is always new and different, hopefully. But yeah, if you have any final thoughts for today, I'm always curious to hear from everybody out there. I've talked about this before. I'm just going to mention it again. I think you guys have heard it, but we have someone in our midst at CG Spectrum who is an anime person. I'm just going to actually play this while I'm talking. Here, I'm going to turn off the CU so you can just see it playing the cleanup layer. So, I mean, if you look at the cleanup layer right now, without anything else, you can just see what I've been working on. It's still got a long ways to go, so just barely getting started on the cleanup pass. But soon enough, it'll be fleshed out, and then I'll start coloring it, and it'll look real pretty. Anyway, those are the cleanup drawings I've done today. But the animation itself looks like this. There we go. So I'll just let that play a little bit as I talk about. So at CG Spectrum, we have somebody who's an anime specialist and is working with us to teach our 2D animation program, and is going to start up with us soon. And so we're taking people who want to sign up for this. The only thing you have to do is when you apply, you have to specify that you want to be involved in the 2D animation instructor, because the seats are going to be limited. The instructor doesn't have, is not full time with us, at least not yet, maybe soon, maybe someday soon. So if you go to cgspectrum.com, you'll find an apply now button that you can apply for classes. And specifically here, I've got cgspectrum.com, the blog. I'll put that in the chat window just so you guys can see it if you want to. And here we go. Doink, there it is. Hopefully you can see it. So if you're interested in anime, if you want to learn 2D animation from somebody who works in Tokyo as an anime artist currently, head on over to CG Spectrum on the link that I gave you, or cgspectrum.com, and the blog here is where you can read about the experience of being an anime person. So even if you're not interested in becoming someone who works in anime, you might want to check out this blog, which talks at length about what it's like to work there and some of the thoughts. It's a really cool article. I read it last week, and I was really excited about it. It's a new direction we're going in. I'm going to focus a little more on anime. So you can see it's a nice, solid article. So yeah, if you have any interest in that, head over to the CG Spectrum blog. And if you're inclined to work in 2D animation, if you want to know how it works from an anime standpoint, go ahead and apply for the class, but specify that you want to do it with the anime specialty version. Also, you can go to CG Spectrum and you can look up the other classes if you're interested, and talk about some other things like concept art, 3D animation, which I'm also part of, and various and sundry other topics. We also have live streams that talk about some of these projects, processes, things. So check out the other live streams if you want. But this has been me, Scott Claus, talking to you from the magic world of cgspectrum.com. And I hope you had a nice time today with me. Thank you for sharing this time. I always enjoy the conversations we have, and I love that you guys are chiming in. I love repeat offenders who come back for more every week, and makes this a lot of fun for me, and I hope it's been fun for you. Other than that, I will be back next time, same place, to talk about some more animation fun, and keep working on projects, and hope you have a great rest of the day, a great rest of the week. Hope to see some of you again next time. And that's me, Scott, signing off. Take care.